I had never owned my own rental property at that point in time. The experience and resume I gained while working for free for that year is what got the deal done. And it
Really?
also is what got my very first investor willing to do a deal with me, because there's no concept of proof. There's no really nothing for me to show him other than, hey, I've done this, I've managed this, here's some recommendations, and he was willing to do it. So
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of Weiss Advice. I am really excited today, me being Yona Weiss, your host, to meet with Seth Teagle from Columbus, Ohio. I'm really excited to be speaking with you, and thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing today?
absolutely, doing very good. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Guys, give you a little background. Seth is a multifamily investor. I know you've never heard any of those on our podcast before, so this should be pretty insightful. No, but stick around because he, like everyone, has a unique story and a unique brand, and we're just kind of bringing that out and just have a conversation with you. One thing that I do like, I mean, obviously, like I said, you're a multifamily investor based in Columbus. You got a lot of experience, over a decade of experience doing that, but now have been scaling over the past couple of years and getting into bigger and larger deals and projects. I'd love to get into that today, just to kind of learn a little bit how you went about doing that. But first, tell us a little bit about your background. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you have a background in as a firefighter.
Yeah, so I still am currently a full-time fireman, which hopefully sooner than later that could go by the wayside just due to growth, but we'll see. I mean, I've been doing it for 21 years now. Loved it, but I got into real estate investing and it's just kind of really taken off. And I never thought I'd find something that I was passionate about, like I was that job, but that was I've been in that career field since I was 18. So I got out of high school, got in the fire service, went to college, been doing it ever since. So
Wow.
It's kind of been something I've been a part of.
That's amazing. And it sounds like something that would be a full-time job. Is it just some, kind of part-time? Like how do you balance that?
So we work 24 hours on and then we have 2 days off. So every third day I'm at the firehouse. And then my partner, who I partnered up when I decided that I wanted to scale bigger, he's also a fireman, but he's on a different shift than I am. So every day there's one of us off to run the business and work on things and keep everything moving forward. So
that's good. That's probably pretty smart.
The best schedule you can have for doing what we're doing and being the size we are now and not having to have left your W-2 yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but still 20 hours on, but you're still working, officially a 40-hour work week, right?
Well, it's 24 hours on. So we go on at 7:30 in the morning and we get off 7:30 the next day.
Wow.
And then we have 2 days off. Yep.
That's amazing. So you got the fire pole, the whole outfit, everything. Probably a lot of fun. A lot of fun for the kids.
Yep. I ride a ladder truck. So I'm an officer lieutenant on a ladder truck here in Columbus. And like I said, I love it's been a big passion of my life and big part of my life for a long time. So
absolutely. I mean, listen, that in of itself could be a great, if you haven't thought about it yet, a great brand building.
We're actually working on that. So Tim and I are, we're going to start putting out more just content and more putting our story out there more, because like I said, it really is a great story of how two average Joes have made it bigger in the real estate market and in buying multifamily and scaling. And then, where things are going to go in the next couple of years are for us, and where we think they'll go anyways is
right.
Pretty neat story. So gives hope to anybody out there that whatever you're doing, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be born into this for sure.
Absolutely. And let's just take that. I'd love to go down that path a little bit. I mean, you said you've been in the fire department since you were 18, before you went to college and been doing that for 21 years. How did you even stumble upon real estate? Everyone has a different way that they come across it. Was it a colleague of yours? Was it, a book you read, a podcast? How on earth did you even stumble across it in the first place?
Yeah. So I started in the fire service in Florida. And when I lived down there, a roommate of mine, I was in the fire service. He was actually had opened a cell phone store and it failed. And he went in, he was like, well, what am I going to do? So he went into real estate and he went in to become a realtor. Mm-hmm. And then I lost connection with him over the years. And then when I reconnected with him, here he was down there in Pensacola, Florida, just absolutely crushing it in a single family space, flipping houses, he was wholesaling. He had a whole like mentorship program before mentorship programs were a thing, or this kind of like guru thing that he was doing where, just had this whole thing built out. And I was just blown away by it. And so back then he emailed me an MP3 of this course that he sold, but he was giving it to me for free on like basically how to flip a house. And it was basically his system on, how he finds a house, does all the contracting and the finishes and all the how he makes it scalable to do more than, 20 to 30 a month. And I just found that super fascinating. And that really kind of sparked my interest to get into real estate. Well, then I was just, again, going on about life, didn't really know anybody here locally doing it. I've jokingly said before that real estate's kind of like Fight Club, where you hear rumblings about it and you see it on TV, which like you really don't know, you don't know anybody doing it. But then the minute you kind of like get, you meet somebody that's actually doing it in real life and you kind of get invited to the club, it's like your whole mind can be blown by just this whole subculture of investors that are out there.
Right.
And so I met a guy here locally that was a general contractor that flipped houses, and he had left his W-2 job, and we happened to I was actually building a deck on my house, a 20 by 20 deck. All firemen or, seem to have like a part-time job or do something else. And I had a construction background through my career for a while and different things. And so I was doing that. And I got to a point where I was tired of doing it. So I hired this guy to come and finish the stairs for me. And when he came, we just started talking. And that's when I found out that he was flipping houses. And I was probably like a little kid at Christmas. Finally, there's a real person standing in front of me that's into real estate investing. I want to talk to you. I want to, I was taking no prisoners. There's no answer that he was going to give me that was going to turn me away. So
that's awesome.
I nailed him down. We went and had a drink, and I just picked his brain. And really, he was the first person to ever tell me about bigger pockets. He was, all the newbie stuff that you hear. And the thing that I told him was, it was before I had ever even heard it, was like, how can I provide value to this guy? Mm-hmm. And what I heard when I was listening to him talk was he needed a project manager. And I'm like, I've got a construction background. I've done stuff like this, through inspecting and just my career and running crews and dealing with people like that. I'm like, I could do this all day long. So I said, I will work for free if you'll teach me kind of like what you do and how you do it. And so that kind of started me down that road. And for about 6 months, I was a project manager. Then I moved into managing his rental portfolio, which was, it was only like 20 units of small duplexes, single family, whatever. But at the time I was like, this is crazy, and I couldn't believe it. And showing units, I'm signing leases, doing all this stuff to help him. And I realized in that year that one, in order to go where I wanted to go, I couldn't do single family because it was just, I was running all over town. Anytime we were going to renovate something, the bathrooms were different, the floor plans were different, all that stuff that you run into in that doing single family stuff. And so I was like, man, I had listened to people that were doing multifamily, and I was like, if I could buy 50 single family homes, or I could buy 50 doors under one roof, why would you not do that? I mean, it just made sense to me.
Right.
So Absolutely. That was what I did. Yeah. The first rental property I ever bought was a 50 unit. So
that's amazing. And so it was just really came about through the experience that you had with running this other guy's business partnering with him, obviously doing something that added value in a way that you had some experience with. And then at a certain point, it was like, okay, well, you've had experience without your own properties, right? And I think that gave you a jump start, probably more than other people, to go and buy a 50 unit because you saw, hey, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would I be running around town?
Well, and it helped out a lot because the very first, I always tell people that come up to me, they're like, how do I, they're a single family. I want to get to multifamily. I'm like, you got to have a resume. And you could have a ton of rentals, or you could have flipped a bunch of houses. But when you go and sit in front of a lender, one of the first things they're going to ask you is, well, you're like, oh, that's great. You've done all those things and we get it, but you've never owned a 50 unit or a 100 unit or an 80 unit or a 30 unit, whatever it is. If you've only owned a duplex and you go out and try to buy a 20 unit, there's a gap there that the lenders see as a risk. And when they're profiling you to know whether or not they want to lend to you, that's part of the problem, right? Is it like I got told, the deal makes sense, your credit makes sense, your job history, you got a great W-2 job, like all these things make sense, but they're like, help us make the connection. And so I went in like full presentation mode, and I had never owned my own rental property at that point in time. The experience and resume I gained while working for free for that year is what got the deal done. And it also is what got my very first investor willing to do a deal with me, because there's no concept of proof. There's no really nothing for me to show him other than, hey, I've done this, I've managed this, here's some recommendations, and he was willing to do it. So
That's amazing. And so the lender was able to lend on the property. I mean, commercial lenders in general are looking more at the deal itself, but like you said, they need to see that you have some sort of background. So it's a little bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, well, so at that time, I mean, again, you don't know what you don't know at the first, your first deal. And I didn't have any like mentors like telling me, I had a guy I had talked to on the phone a couple of times that was much bigger than me at the time of what he, so even getting a phone call with him was huge. But I was going to local banks. And so the local banks, I kept finding out that's what I was told. I went to 5 different local banks until I finally found one that kept the loan on their own books. But anything over $1 million with the local banks, they had to bring in a supplemental bank. And so then you just have even more eyes looking at it. And in my case, what I found was, again, the deal made sense, but they wanted me to have more liquidity, or they wanted me to have a higher net worth, or they wanted me to have these different things that at the time I didn't have. I didn't even know back then, like, going out and finding somebody that has net worth and liquidity, like to come into the deal with me. Like, I didn't know any of that stuff. I was just like, I've got the money to buy a 50 unit. This is the sale price. This is what I've got. I've done some underwriting. Right. I did a pro forma. I had to put that together, and I'm like, I think this will work. And I mean, we ended up, because I was heavily involved in it, is the only reason why I was successful. And I was down there every day. I had a management company that was working with me doing the leasing and whatnot, but I was down there every day for a year. When I wasn't at the firehouse, I did a ton of construction myself, so a ton of sweat equity. I was down there with contractors, like in the dirt, doing stuff with them, overseeing them, making sure they were doing everything right. We did it as cheap as cheap as in price, not quality, right? Because I'm down there negotiating pricing, and they see me down there. They're not able to, like, if they're not working, they're not getting paid, and things I've ran into after that, because I'm not there all the time. But that was something that I was able to do, transition that property in 13 months. And when we did our refi, we pulled out $1 million, and I was like sold, I mean, my wife finally was too, right? Because for that whole first year, she was scared to death that I was going to lose all of our money, and that this, our house, because we it was a recourse loan. So she was scared they're going to come take our place, and, all the stuff that everybody has when they're not only are we making our first rental purchase, but we're also getting into this, much bigger deal than she'd ever even considered us being a part of.
Wow. So that first year goes by, you get your refinance and pull out $1 million from the property. You raised value in that property, a tremendous amount. Yeah. And the bank rewarded you with a big fat check.
Yeah, they did. And so I was able to pay off the investor that originally put money in with me, made him happy. I learned actually that deal, I went in undercapitalized. So I had to find some private equity, private capital along the way to keep the construction going, because the loan I had, like, we bought the property, great. Yay, I bought my first property. And then it was like, now what do I do? And I had no idea really what I was in for. I had $50,000 in the bank, and I thought that would be enough. And it was about 150,000 short. And that's with me doing a ton of the work, And so I was able to pay everybody back, and now I had a bunch of money left over. And I'm like, let's go buy something else. And that was how it started for me. And then some of the growth that I've experienced beyond me was, as I realized quickly, the next property, I'm like, well, how am I going to do this by myself? So then I started looking, I found a partner who is Tim, who's my partner now, my main partner. We did a couple deals, and then, we realized that we were in the market that we're in is such a great market and a hot market that a lot of out-of-state people want to get into. Yeah. We were like, that was the pitch that we started giving to brokers that we were friends with, and that we had great relationships with, was when you have people come from out of state that want to buy here, but don't have any, either boots on the ground or they don't know anybody, like, send them my way. Like, let's talk and see if we can work out a deal where we can come in on the GP of the deal and then run it for you on the ground here. Here's our track record, so all of that stuff has really helped us grow a lot over the last few years. That's
amazing. And so what do you attribute most to the growth that now, as having your own real estate company, you've invested in a lot of property. I mean, how many properties altogether have you invested in?
Just in Central Ohio now, we get over 600 doors. Company wide, we have dabblings in over 2,000. So I don't own every piece of part of that, but we have something in there. But again, to me, the overall goal is wealth creation and getting myself in a better spot than I was at. And, like I said, my why is my family. It always has been. I've been married for 15 years. I've got 3 kids, and that was really something else that drove me to real estate. Was I had worked 1,000 hours of overtime the year before I really went into real estate. And if you think about my normal schedule plus 1,000 extra hours, I was at the fire station for 6 months out of 12 months, like living there. I was the deployed, that's the way I looked at it. Like I was in the military and I was in Afghanistan. I mean, I was far away. I'll put it that way.
Right.
Nothing taken away from those guys, but I'm like, this is not survivable. As a family, firemen are the divorce rate for first responders is tremendous, and I just didn't want to do that for my family, my kids, and so I had to find like what else can I do, and it just happened to be
Right.
real estate. So.
And have you been able to kind of scale back or, and focus more time on the family because of the wealth creation?
So I don't work any overtime now at all. And then I take I take all my time off that I can. And then, the one thing that I've really learned in scaling this way is that I don't have to do everything. And so anything that comes on my plate that is not like in my lane of focus or my desired thing, I push it off to other people. And because of the size that we were getting, and that was kind of like I saw was like, if I stay small, I have to do everything.
Right.
And it's super scary. But if you go like really big, you have growth and you have that size where now you may not own everything, but I don't have to be doing everything either. I can hire people. We have a team that, that isn't necessarily like holding equity of the property, but it allows us now to employ people that do a lot of the stuff that allows me to be freed up to be home and be with family and
absolutely, for sure. Let's go back, if you don't mind, to that first 50 unit deal that you had. Yep. That you put in a ton of sweat equity, a ton of time and energy into that, and I'm sure it was a huge learning experience for you. What was like, if you can think of like, I'm sure there were many lessons that were learned there, and several mishaps probably with dealing with contractors, right? If you're there on the ground, you're dealing with everything, right? Was there like anything, like any stories or any, kind of lessons that you learned of something that happened during that project?
Well, I'd say for my first one, like I looked at the rent roll, I looked at the leases, and I'm like, oh, this is what the property's making. And this is, and so I had all the NOI and I had all my stuff that, I had no idea that, I never heard the term heads on beds. I'd never heard the term, or like people like falsifying leases or any of the things that we do now. We do forensic auditing and we match up our bank statements and all the things that you do at a higher level. But back then I didn't know any of that. So I took over the property based on what the seller was saying he was making. The first payment came in and it was like half of what was actually they were proclaiming. And I'm like, what in the heck is going on? And so what I found out was I closed like middle of October, let's say. The first payments came in. We had 18 people move out of 50. We had, I think they had 6 units that were empty already. We had 18 people leave, like overnight, just ghosted, gone. And I wasn't ready for that. And then we had people that were there that were, the lease said, let's say the lease said $700. But that's not what they were actually paying. They were only paying $300 or $400, or maybe they were on a subsidy at the time, and they are the whatever their subsidy was paying $550, and nobody was collecting that $150, and nobody ever had. And so it was just a huge mess that luckily every month I was able to pay the bills, and that was it. Like it wasn't cash flowing, like there's no money to be made. And like I said, it was I'm very lucky, very blessed that I lived locally, right? Because if I had, let's say I'm in Columbus and I bought that in Arizona, I mean, it could have been really bad.
Sure. That's crazy. I mean, that's
that
wild.
Right there is, I mean, but that's right there is part of like what we teach other people too, is, I mean, like you have to do the auditing, you have to trust but verify, you have to say, great, you sent me all these leases, but I need to see supportive documents that show that money is actually going into your account every month, and that your taxes support the money that you're saying that you're making every year, and unfortunately there's just people that are out there that are trying to, they just want to sell the property, and they ran it terribly, or they got into it and they shouldn't have, or whatever the case may be. It's buyer beware in commercial real estate. So
yeah, but on the flip side, it might give you a little insight into finding a seller who doesn't really know what they're doing by analyzing some of those leases and figuring out, oh, this guy really is not necessarily collecting everything he's saying, and there's a lot of room to add value beyond 100%. What the broker might be saying, because the broker is taking the seller's word for it also, probably, right?
Yeah. We found that a lot. And then like we found deals where the sellers were doing great, but because they were kind of still running it on their own, they don't realize that they're $300 under market. They don't really, they're not plugged into what the market's doing like we've been. And so when we go into that area and we get an off market deal, like we just bought one. We took 3 different portfolios and bought all 3 and made it 113 units on one street. But half of that portfolio was, on average was $200 to $300 below market rent. And it was because the guys that had owned it were they were cutting the grass, they were doing the leasing, they were doing the maintenance, and when they sent us their T12, I'd explain them what that was, and they send me over everything written in pencil. And again, nothing against people that do that, but what we find is people that are operating on that level in these bigger properties they can be kind of behind the times, or they're not really keeping their finger on the pulse of the market. And so, but there again too, like these guys that bought their basis getting into that property 20 years ago was way lower than what I'm buying it for.
Right.
So they're crushing it. They can rent their unit out for half of what the market is, and they're still cash flowing great.
Sure.
So they have no.
Absolutely. No, and it's a business. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. So you have these people that they may have just been running this business for themselves and have been perfectly fine with it, right? But you as a new buyer and someone who's interested in actually running the business more efficiently according to today's standards and the market, as you said, it's going to be a totally different business model, right? And you want to make sure that obviously, you're going to be providing the value to the tenants for living in a place like that by upgrading units and by doing things like that, adding amenities. But it is amazing to me how you, especially in kind of small, or smaller Midwest markets, find a lot of these kind of mom and pop owners, as we call them, right, where they're just not sophisticated at all. I mean, you talk about the pencil leases. You're not joking, right? You literally, they got all their bank statements.
There's been several times where like the lender's like, I don't know what to do with this. Can you put this in a Word document or, spreadsheet? Can you, this is, and so here I am, our team's, putting all this stuff together and building this whole pro forma out to give to the lender so they can actually look at it, because they're like, we're not looking at this chicken scratch. We're not going to I can't say the word, decipher this documentation. And so we've done that numerous times too, but a lot of times that's where you can find some major gems.
Yeah.
If you're going to somebody like me who's running it the way that I think it should be, and you ask for a T12 and all the other documentation that you ask for, and it's all submitted to you professionally, it's going to be it should be pretty dialed in, so we found some very, very good deals, and ones where we've had to do the legwork for the seller just to get us to be able to get a loan. But, it's been good for us. So
that's great. That's great. Are you doing anything special in terms of, certain amenities that you're putting in for the new deals that you're buying?
It depends on where it's at. So it's kind of like a case by case basis, like an area, if we're in a tertiary market, we may just do we try to harden every unit. So no, we don't do carpet. We don't do, certain things, and no matter what the market is, but the level of upgrade is based on what the market is, right? So there's some stuff some markets, tertiary markets around Columbus that we're buying, and that we wouldn't put granite in because granite's not going to get us a return on the rents. The people that are going to rent there, they don't care, and so we don't put granite in, or it's all adjusted by the market and where we're buying.
Gotcha. Awesome. If you would, let me take you or take me rather, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. You've been doing this for some time now, but where do you see yourself going? I mean, is it do you have a certain goal in terms of how many units? Do you have a certain goal in terms of, what you can generate in terms of wealth, goals in terms of how you can give back? I mean, what are you seeing in terms of that?
So I don't know if I really have an end goal right now. I mean, I'll be 40 in April, and I'm doing pretty well. I mean, in another 10 years, I think I've got another 20 years to go at least, but I don't know. I don't really know if I have that end goal in mind. I know that where we see ourselves going right now is one of the huge bottlenecks that I kept running into was, we could buy the property, but then dealing with the contractors and really lasering in the CapEx budget and that whole value add part was hard. It was something that we struggled with even as we got bigger. And so what we've done now is we've partnered with a group here in Columbus called Project X, and they were doing project management support, and they were doing some pretty large commercial stuff, Facebook data centers. They did some notable ones, or we got several big hospitals here, and they were managing all of the construction process for that. So what we've done with them is partnered, and we're coming up with a whole thing for multifamily, where if you're buying something, we're kind of using our portfolio and what we're doing as the guinea pig, if you will. But if you're, if you have a listener that's hey, I'm buying this 150 unit deal, and we can come in and do all the due diligence. We can get all of your CapEx budget dialed in to, down to the toilet, down to the plumbing fixture, down to whatever. Right. And then you have everything that you need to be able to present to your lender. That way, when you're whether you're raising the capital or you're doing a bridge loan and you're getting the money, you know that you're going to have enough to get that project completed. And then we can provide the labor, or we can provide, or we can provide just the project management piece of it. And if you're syndicating the deal, there's certain requirements you have with the SEC that you have to be able to provide financial statements and documentation and all that stuff. And so that's what we base everything on. So if you're, we already know what is needed because that's what we are already doing. And so now it's like, let's remove that bottleneck for everybody else. So I don't know, like for us, I've always tried to say what is bottlenecking me now at 600 doors or 1,000 doors? How do I get to like some of these guys I talk with have 4,000, 5,000 doors? Like, how do you get to this big group that has 12,000 doors? Like they've been able to scale because they've removed a lot of these roadblocks. And so we're looking to remove those for ourselves and then for others,
Absolutely.
That's kind of what we're working on.
And it is a lot about scale. I mean, it has to be anyone who's buying that number of properties or that number of doors, they have to have the right strategic team members. They have to have the property management team. And a lot of these guys will end up creating their own or starting their own property management company just in order to be able to kind of integrate all of that, all their own properties so that they can scale faster. But again, it does have a lot to do with the systems, the teams, and everything else. Fit it all into place and you'll be successful. I mean, that's really the name of the game. But Seth, I want to transition now to something we like to call the final four. These are 4 questions I ask all my guests. And the first question to you is, what is the worst job that you ever had?
Oh, the worst job I ever had. Well, like I said, I've been a fireman since I was 18. So that's been a big majority of it. But I would say when I was younger, I started working on when I was on my 14th birthday, I was busting tables. But in that time frame of being younger, I was working at a fireworks store in North Dakota. That's where I'm originally from. And I had to dress up as a dog, like stand on the side of the road and wave at everybody when they went by. And it's summertime in North Dakota. Like I lived in Minot, so it's like on this continent, it's like the most drastic temperatures where it can be like 60 below zero in the winter and 110 in the summer. And just, being out there, 15 years old, sweating like crazy. Like I said, it was nothing long term, but that's always one that I remember when I talk to my kids about that, like when you're be thankful for what you have, because I always think about that, I could always go back to being that guy.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't sound like any fun. I had no idea the temperatures were that extreme. And
where we were Minot's an hour south of Canada. So you get all the Canadian tundra snow and cold temperatures in the winter. And then in the summertime, it's a dry heat. I mean, and it'll be 110 degrees. It's crazy.
That's wild. Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, the winter part I understand, but
nobody wants to go there in the winter.
Oh, crazy. How people survive there, I have no idea. Yeah, the second question is going to be, what is a book you've read that has given you a paradigm shift?
I think for me, I read it a while ago, but it's Dan Sullivan's book called Who Not How. I know a lot of people have probably read it.
Yeah.
Like really try to live by that. I mean, that's how I base everything on. And I think that's really helped me with my growth is if it comes in front of me or on my plate, as I say, and it's not something that is keeping me going in my, trying to stay laser focused on what I'm doing, then I take it immediately and try to give it to, whoever is able to do it. Or if I don't have anybody on my team that's able to do it, then I'm looking for either hiring somebody else or some outside source. Like I said, for me, construction management and project management was something that continued to slow us down. And so I found a company that was already doing it on a much bigger scale. And I pitched the whole multifamily thing to them because they had never thought about it. And so we were like, look, take our portfolio, let's do it, And so now I don't have that problem anymore, so stuff like that, right. I just, that's really helped out a lot. So that changed my life.
Absolutely. No. And I've definitely heard that book. Definitely not the first person who has mentioned this. So I'm grateful to you doubly for that because I don't have to add another book to my book list.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a common.
It's already there.
I feel like it's one of those books where it's like if Rich Dad Poor Dad, it's like that one changed everybody's life. Right. And then if you haven't read, if you haven't really read or absorbed that, that one, Traction. There's several of them out there that are like, everybody I know that's like super successful. It's like those are like always the ones that like are worn out in the corner because they've read them multiple times. And I always seem to get something else out of them because that's the funny part is. Like Traction, for instance, the first time I read that book, I wasn't really ready to receive some of the information that was in that book. And I read it, I'm like, oh, this is okay. It wasn't that great. And then I reread it again like 2 years later and it blew my mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the case with everything. I mean, that's, we just, just a totally other, perspective. I mean, we read the Bible, right? The 5 books every single year. And, we go through it because you're a different person every single time you read those stories, you read those, and so any book, whatever it is, that's the example that just came to my mind now, but any book, whatever point you read it at your life, obviously will affect you differently based on where you're at. So definitely add that to the list. Third question is, what can be a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
I've always wanted to play acoustic guitar, believe it or not. I'm 6'7". It's hard to tell when I'm sitting in this chair talking with you, but I've always been told I'd be really good at guitar playing because I have really big hands, but I've never tried. And I've always liked acoustic guitar. So maybe sometime in my life when things slow down, I'll have to hire somebody to help teach me to play that. But that's something that I've always wanted to do.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something you definitely can and should. Why not? I mean, music's beautiful. Guitar is to be honest, I mean, having bigger hands may help you. I don't know.
I don't know. They always tell you when you're like, you're doing the key. I don't even know how to say it. The neck of the guitar when you're working that. They're like, oh, my fingers can spread out so far. They're like, oh, you'd be a great guitar player. Never pursued it, but if you're a guitar player and you're listening to this, you'll probably be laughing right now. Thinking,
That's great. Well, I'll check back on you in a year or two, see if I've taken any lessons until.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, this isn't hopefully we talk before that.
Right, that's true as well. Fourth and final question: what does success mean to you?
So I mean, it's an interesting question because I don't really. For me, I've always been, I'm not like really in this I guess specific to this is I'm not really in it to like just make millions and millions and millions of dollars and leave all this money in my, I really like my biggest why getting into this is my family. And I feel like I've, tried to be a good steward of that and not get so wrapped up in real estate and building a company that I forget them again, right. Or right. I got into this for a reason and then you kind of forget it. But, to your point earlier, you talking about the Bible is I go to church. I feel like that I thought I would go into ministry when I was getting out of high school, and I did not do that. I went to fire service. But, something that was impressioned upon me when I was in high school was we went on several mission trips and whatnot, and my parents couldn't afford to send me. And within my church, people sponsored me to be able to go. And I had, some life-changing experiences during those trips. And so that's something for me is as I grow and as I have the ability to kind of take care of others, that's something that I've talked with my group about here locally is setting up a fund or something like that where, I can provide that same or, be a part of providing that same experience for others in that age group, because it was just it's just something that I took with me for my, even into my adult life, it's transitioned into that where I still remember those experiences and being able to truly help people. It's the same thing like at Thanksgiving or Christmas, I take my kids to go around and deliver turkeys and Thanksgiving dinners and whatnot, because I remember when I was growing up, people coming to my house, giving my mom a box of food, that was our Thanksgiving dinner, that was what we had. And so, that made such a huge impression on me being the child receiving that now that I'm in a position later in life that I can provide that value to somebody else, that's it's something that I really enjoy doing. And so for me, success is being able to get big enough to where I can take care of my own household, but then also help take care of others.
Absolutely. No, it's really that speaks a lot to the person that you are. And I definitely relate to that a lot as well, because especially coming from a place where we're on the receiving end, giving back means that much more. And you can feel, what people are going through, when people are in those situations, and is so much easier for you to kind of go out of your way. At the same time, it may be easy to kind of close yourself off and kind of regret, not want to have anything to do with that. But a bigger person obviously is one who can look at their life experiences and see, how can I help people who were in the place that I'm at? Exactly like you said, sponsoring people or giving back through food and support. That's incredible. And I wish you much success, especially with that definition of success. You'll be great. Well, thank you, Seth. How can our listeners find you or reach out to you?
So they can find me on Facebook under just my name, Seth Teagle. They can find me on LinkedIn, and then they can check out our website. It's www.thestreamgroups, plural, streamgroups.com. And they can reach me through our portal on there. They can just fill out the information and then email me, and it comes to my email here directly, and I'll get in contact with them.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll definitely put that in the show notes. Anyone wants to reach out to Seth, please do. Make sure to do that. And I appreciate you spending the time with us today. It's been great speaking with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us once again. And remember, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.